The house felt wrong the moment I woke up, like the air itself had shifted overnight, thick and heavy with something I couldn't name. Normally, my morning started the same way. Max curled up beside me, his soft fur pressed against my arm, his tail thumping lazily when he sensed I was waking up. Sometimes, if I took too long to get up, he'd nuzzle against my face or lick my hand, his silent way of telling me that he was ready for breakfast. It was routine, comforting, a part of my life that never changed. But today, my bed was cold. Empty. The absence hit me before my brain could fully register it, and my heart skipped a beat. I sat up too fast, my stomach twisting, and reached for the blankets, expecting him to be buried somewhere beneath them. But there was nothing, just sheets that had gone cold overnight. I ran a hand over them, the feeling of dread thickening with every second. "Max?" My voice cracked against the silence. I listened, holding my breath, waiting for the jingle of his collar or the sound of his paws tapping against the hardwood floor. Nothing. A strange, choking panic crawled up my throat as I swung my legs over the bed, my heart hammering now. The door was open, strange, because I always shut it before sleeping. I stumbled out into the hallway, the morning light filtering through the windows in soft golden slants, and called his name again. No response. Maybe he was downstairs. Maybe Mom had let him out early. Maybe he was just in the backyard, running in circles like he always did after waking up. I forced myself to take a deep breath, pushing the panic down, and made my way downstairs. The house felt eerily quiet. Usually, Max's food bowl would be rattling against the tile as he ate, or his tail would be smacking against the furniture as he ran to greet me. But there was none of that. Instead, the kitchen was still. Then I saw her. Mom sat at the table, flipping through a magazine, sipping her coffee, looking completely at ease. The sight of her calmness made something inside me twist, but I swallowed the feeling and focused on what mattered. My eyes darted around the kitchen. No food bowl. No leash by the door. The pit in my stomach grew. "Where's Max?" My voice was hoarse, almost too quiet. Mom turned a page, not even glancing up. "I gave him away." The room tilted. My breath caught in my throat, and for a second, I thought I had misheard her. That couldn't be right. Couldn't be right. "You what?" The words barely made it out, strangled and disbelieving. She finally looked up, her face void of any remorse, as if she had just told me something completely normal, something as casual as I took out the trash. "I found him a better home," she said simply. "You've been too busy lately, and he needed more attention." I did what was best for him. Something in my chest caved in, like the floor beneath me had just crumbled away. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The words "better home" kept repeating in my head, over and over, like they had no meaning. "You gave him away?" My voice was barely above a whisper, but my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Without even asking me?" Mom sighed, setting her coffee down with that same infuriating calmness, like this was just another conversation she had to endure. "It's not like I abandoned him. He's with a good family. A woman from the next town over. She has a big yard, a daughter who loves dogs. He'll be happier there." My vision blurred. A hot, searing anger burned in my veins, my skin feeling too tight for my body. "Who is she?" I forced the words through my teeth, gripping the back of a chair to keep myself from shaking. "Give me her name. Her number. I'll go get him." But Mom just shook her head, already standing up, already moving on. "No, you won't. This is done. You need to accept it and move forward. Max isn't your responsibility anymore." The way she said it, the way she dismissed me like my feelings didn't matter, like I was just being dramatic, it was like someone had dumped gasoline over my grief and struck a match. "You think you can just decide that for me?" My voice rose, the heat of my anger spilling out before I could stop it. "You think you can just get rid of him like he's nothing? Like he's not?" My breath hitched, my throat closing up before I could finish the sentence. Mom exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples like she was the one suffering. "He was a family dog," she said, her patience wearing thin. "And I made a decision that was best for the family. This isn't just about you." I let out a short, bitter laugh, something ugly and sharp. "A family dog?" My hands trembled at my sides. No, he was mine. I fed him, I took him on walks, I was the one who stayed up with him when he was sick. You never even cared about him, and now you're acting like you get to decide what's best for him. Mom's face hardened. I am your mother, and I don't need your permission to make decisions. It was then that I realized something terrifying. She didn't care. Not even a little. She had done this without thinking twice, without regret, and no amount of yelling, no amount of crying was going to make her feel guilty about it. She had stolen from me, taken the one thing that truly made me happy and given him away like he was just an object, something replaceable. But Max wasn't replaceable. And I wasn't just going to sit here and accept it. Fine. If she wanted to pretend like this was no big deal, if she wanted to treat my pain like it was nothing, then I would show her what nothing felt like. She had taken something from me. I was going to take something from her. Max was coming home. And my mother? She was about to learn a painful lesson. The rage didn't fade. It sat inside me like a sickness, growing worse by the hour. My mother had done something unforgivable, and she didn't even care. She expected me to get over it, to cry for a few days and then accept it. But I wasn't accepting anything. Max was out there, confused, waiting for me, wondering why I hadn't come to get him. I wasn't going to let him believe I had abandoned him. My mother had made a mistake, and I was going to fix it. But first, I needed to find out where he was. I waited until the house was silent that night, listening for the telltale sound of my mother's bedroom door shutting, the faint creak of her bed as she got comfortable, the long exhale of someone who had done something terrible and felt no guilt. Then I moved. I made my way downstairs in the dark, silent as a shadow, my bare feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. My mother wasn't careful with her secrets because she didn't think she needed to be. She left everything in the same places, her purse on the counter, her notebooks stacked by the fridge, receipts and papers shoved haphazardly into drawers she never locked. I started with the drawer closest to the fridge, the one where she tossed mail and grocery lists. I sifted through them, my breath tight in my chest, but there was nothing useful. Then I moved to her purse, carefully unzipping the side pocket. Loose bills, crumpled tissues, a tube of lipstick, but nothing that told me where Max had been taken. I was about to put it back when my fingers brushed against something stiff paper. I pulled it out and angled it toward the moonlight filtering through the kitchen window. A small note in my mother's handwriting, a phone number scribbled across it. Next to it, a name. Karen L. It wasn't much, but it was something. I took a picture of the note with my phone and put it back exactly as I found it. But a phone number wasn't an address, and I wasn't about to call this woman blindly. If she suspected anything, if she realized I was trying to take Max back, she might make it harder for me. I needed to know exactly where to find him before I made my move. The next morning, I got to work. I tried running the number through a basic search, but nothing useful came up. If I wanted more, I needed to dig deeper. I turned to local online groups, searching for people named Karen in the next town over. It was slow work, frustrating, every post blending into the next, but I forced myself to stay focused. There were dozens of women named Karen, too many to sift through aimlessly, so I had to narrow it down. I remembered what Ava had told me, mid-40s, blonde, had a little girl. That was my lead. I checked local parenting groups, scrolling through posts one by one. It was painful slow, but then I found it. A message from a Karen Langley, posted the day before, thanking a family for letting her adopt a dog. She had included a picture. It was Max. I didn't hesitate. I clicked on her profile, but most of it was private. Still, I had a last name now, and that gave me more to work with. I searched for her name in property records, but nothing showed up immediately. Frustration clawed at my chest. She wasn't making this easy, but I wasn't stopping. I kept searching, this time checking school board meeting notes, community event posts, anything that might link her name to an address. Then I found it. A school newsletter, posted 3 months ago, listing her as a volunteer for a fundraising event. Next to her name was her full address. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. I spent the rest of the day watching my mother, waiting for an opportunity. She had errands to run in the afternoon, and I made sure to be in my room when she left so she wouldn't ask me to come along. The second her car pulled out of the driveway, I was moving. I went into her bedroom, straight to the nightstand where she kept the emergency cash she never locked away. She never thought she needed to, never thought I would take it, and that was her mistake. I took just enough for a ride out of town, nothing noticeable, nothing she would realize was missing right away. I called a ride and gave the driver the address I had found. My pulse was steady, my hands no longer shaking. I had no idea what I was about to walk into, no clue if Karen would even be home, but I wasn't waiting any longer. If my mother thought she could decide my life for me, if she thought she could steal from me without consequences, she was wrong. The ride was quiet, the driver not asking questions, which I was grateful for. My heart pounded harder the closer we got, my stomach twisting with a mixture of anticipation and something I didn't want to name. I had already decided that I was leaving with Max, no matter what I had to do. When the car finally pulled up in front of the house, I took a deep breath and got out. It was nicer than I expected, a two-story home with a wide front yard, a small swing set near the porch, and a garden that looked like it was well cared for. It didn't look like the kind of place where people stole things that didn't belong to them. But I knew better than to trust appearances. I didn't hesitate. I walked up to the door, knocked twice, and waited. It wasn't long before I heard footsteps, and then the door swung open. A woman stood there, tall, blonde, in her mid-40s, just like Ava had said. She blinked at me in surprise, clearly not expecting a stranger at her door. "Can I help you?" I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. "I'm here for my dog." She frowned. "Excuse me?" "Max," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "The dog you got yesterday. He's mine. My mother gave him away without my permission, and I want him back." Karen's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm sorry, but that's not how this works. Your mother told me he needed a new home. My daughter has already bonded with him." I clenched my hands at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. "He's not yours. He never was. I didn't agree to this. My mother had no right to give him away." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "I understand that you're upset, but this isn't something I can undo. He's settled here now, and it wouldn't be fair to take him away from my daughter. I didn't care about her daughter. I didn't care about what she thought was fair. Max wasn't some object to be passed around, and he wasn't staying here." I took a step forward. "I'm not leaving without him." Her jaw tightened. "Then I'm calling the police." I didn't flinch. "Go ahead." Because I wasn't bluffing. And I wasn't walking away. Karen stared at me for a long time, her fingers twitching slightly as if debating whether she should actually take out her phone and call the police or if she was just using it as a threat. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give her any reason to believe that I would back down because I wouldn't. She sighed, shifting her weight slightly, crossing her arms as she took a step closer to the doorframe, blocking my view of the inside of the house as if she knew exactly what I was looking for and wasn't about to let me see it. "You don't get to just show up here and demand a dog back like this is some kind of transaction you can reverse. Your mother made a decision, and I trusted her word when she said you were fine with it. If you have a problem, you need to take that up with her, not me." I could feel my fingers curling into fists at my sides, my nails biting into my palms hard enough that it should have hurt, but it didn't. My mother had lied to her, twisted the situation so that Karen wouldn't think twice about taking Max, and now she was using that as an excuse to keep him here. She thought just because an adult had spoken, it was the final word, that I didn't have any say in this just because I wasn't the one who handed Max over personally. She thought I was just some kid making a scene, but she didn't understand that I wasn't here to argue. I was here to take Max back. "Then you should have done your own research before taking someone else's dog," I said, keeping my voice level, refusing to let the frustration leak through. "Because I didn't agree to this, and I'm telling you right now that you have something that doesn't belong to you. So, I'll ask you again. Where is he?" Karen exhaled sharply, glancing behind her, shifting uncomfortably like she was debating whether she should slam the door in my face or try to explain herself further. I could hear the faint sound of something moving inside the house, nails clicking against the floor. A familiar shuffle that made my pulse jump because I knew that sound. Max was inside. He was right there, probably confused, probably looking for me, and the fact that I couldn't get to him made the rage burn even hotter in my chest. "Look," she said finally, her voice softer now, almost like she felt bad, like she thought she could talk me into understanding her side. "I know you're upset, and I get that this is hard for you, but my daughter has already gotten attached. She's been wanting a dog for so long, and your mother made it clear that Max wasn't being properly cared for. I'm sorry if that wasn't true, but it's done now. Taking him away from her would be just as cruel as what your mother did to you. I didn't care about her daughter. I didn't care that she had wanted a dog, that she had played with Max for a single day and thought that meant she got to keep him forever. Max wasn't a prize, wasn't some toy to be passed around whenever someone else decided they wanted him more. He was my best friend, and he belonged with me. That's not my problem," I said, my voice sharp, unwavering. "I didn't agree to give him away, so as far as I'm concerned, you have my stolen property in your house. If you're not going to give him back willingly, then I'll get the police involved myself." Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her face because she hadn't expected me to throw the threat back at her. She had been ready to scare me off, but she hadn't thought for a second that I would be willing to escalate things. That was her mistake. Before she could respond, a smaller voice cut through the tense silence. "Who are you?" I looked past Karen to see a little girl standing just inside the house, her light brown hair pulled into two messy braids, her eyes wide with confusion. She was clutching a dog toy in one hand, something bright and colorful, something that Max would have already destroyed by now if he were actually playing with it. I felt my stomach twist because I knew exactly who she was, knew exactly why she was here, and it only made my anger grow worse. "Go back inside, Lily," Karen said, her voice clipped, her posture stiff. The girl didn't move right away, her eyes flickering between me and her mother, and then she frowned. "Is Max your dog?" "Yes," I said immediately, not even looking at Karen anymore. "He's mine." Lily hesitated, shifting on her feet, her fingers tightening around the toy. She looked down at it, then back at me, and then, slowly, her grip loosened. She wasn't stupid. She had only had Max for a day, and even she could tell that something wasn't right. I wasn't sure if it was the way I was standing, the way Karen was trying to shut me out, or if Max himself had been acting differently, but she knew something was wrong. "Mom," she asked, her voice quieter now. "Did you take someone's dog?" Karen's jaw tensed. "Lily, go inside." "But..." "Now." Lily hesitated for a moment longer, then dropped the toy onto the floor and ran down the hallway. I heard a door close somewhere inside the house, and then Karen turned back to me, her face tight with irritation. "I'm not having this conversation at my front door. You need to leave." I didn't move. She let out a frustrated breath and took a step forward, lowering her voice like she was trying to make me see reason. "You need to understand that I'm just trying to do the right thing. I really do believe Max is better off here. Your mother told me you didn't have time for him anymore, that you weren't even taking care of him. I don't know what's true and what's not, but I can't just..." A sharp bark cut her off. The sound came from inside the house, loud, familiar, a noise that made my chest feel like it was going to cave in. My hands clenched tighter, my nails digging in so hard that I was sure I'd leave marks. "Max," I called, not even thinking, not even hesitating. I heard more movement, nails clicking against the floor faster now, a scrabbling noise like he was trying to get to me, and then another bark. A sharp, excited, desperate bark. Karen turned, panic flashing across her face. I wasn't leaving without him. Not now. Not ever. Karen turned sharply, her hand tightening around the doorknob as if she expected me to try and push past her, but I wasn't going to. Not yet. Max was inside. I could hear him, could tell by the way his paws were scrambling against the floor that he was trying to get to me. He knew I was here. He wasn't settling into this new home the way she wanted him to, wasn't bonding the way she had convinced herself he would. She had tried to justify keeping him, but the truth was right in front of her now, barking, scratching, trying desperately to reach me because he knew where he belonged. Karen hesitated for a fraction of a second, like she wasn't sure what to do now that her lie had unraveled in real time, but I wasn't waiting for her to figure it out. I took a step forward, my voice steady even though my entire body was tense with the need to act. "Let him out," I said, my eyes locked on hers, refusing to back down. "He's not your dog. He's never been your dog. And you know that." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her entire posture rigid, as if she was trying to convince herself that she was in the right. She had been so sure of her decision when she opened the door, so confident that she had done the right thing by keeping him, but now there was doubt. Now there was hesitation. Now she was hearing the proof that she had made a mistake. She had spent a day with him, barely enough time for him to learn her name, and yet she had believed that she could replace everything he had ever known with something new. But dogs weren't like people. They didn't just forget the ones they loved, and Max wasn't forgetting me. She took a slow breath, her fingers still curled tightly around the door handle, but before she could say anything, a sharp thud came from inside the house, followed by another bark, more urgent this time. I didn't hesitate. "Max," I called again, louder this time, letting every ounce of emotion I had been holding in pour into my voice. A frantic scratching sound echoed from inside, the unmistakable sound of nails against wood, and then the distant thump of something hitting against a door. Max wasn't just barking anymore. He was trying to get out. He was throwing his weight against whatever was keeping him locked away, refusing to accept that there was a barrier between us. Karen flinched slightly, the tension in her face deepening, and for the first time since I had arrived, there was something else in her expression. Guilt. "You need to leave," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. "You know I'm not going to do that," I shot back, refusing to look away from her, refusing to give her an inch to push me back. "You're keeping him locked up because you know if he sees me, he won't stay with you. You keep saying he's part of your family now, but you don't even trust him to make that choice for himself. If you really believed what you're saying, you'd let him come to the door. You'd let him decide." She swallowed, shifting slightly, her shoulders rising and falling with a long, slow breath. The excuses were dying in her throat, every argument she had built crumbling under the weight of reality. I could see it happening in real time, the way she kept glancing back toward the noise, the way her fingers twitched like she was debating whether she should turn around or hold her ground. But I didn't give her time to convince herself of something else. "Open the door," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "Let me see him." She didn't answer. Another loud thud came from inside, followed by a sharp yelp, and before I could even think, my patience snapped. I pushed forward, not shoving her, not trying to force my way inside, but stepping close enough that she instinctively moved back, her grip on the door loosening just enough for me to grab the edge of it before she could slam it shut. She took a startled step backward, her expression flashing from shock to anger in an instant, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't playing her game. I wasn't begging, wasn't trying to negotiate, wasn't going to listen to another excuse about why I didn't deserve to have my dog back. I pushed the door open and stepped inside before she could stop me. Max's barks grew frantic the moment he saw me. His tail was wagging so hard it blurred, his entire body shaking with excitement, but there was something else, something that made my stomach turn. He wasn't running to me. He couldn't run to me. There was a gate blocking the hallway, one of those cheap baby gates meant to keep small children from wandering, and Max was behind it, his front paws pressed against it, his nails digging into the plastic as he whined and barked, his entire body straining against the barrier between us. His leash was hanging from a hook nearby, untouched, which meant they hadn't even taken him outside. They had locked him up, kept him contained, because they knew. They knew. "Move," I said, my voice so sharp that Karen actually took a step back. "Wait, just." I didn't listen. I walked straight past her, reached down, and unlatched the gate. The second it swung open, Max launched himself forward, nearly knocking me over as he jumped up, his paws pressing into my chest, his face burying into my neck as he let out the most broken, relieved whimper I had ever heard. I wrapped my arms around him tightly, my throat burning, my heart pounding so hard it hurt, but I didn't let go. I didn't care about Karen. I didn't care about her daughter. I didn't care about anything except the fact that Max was here, safe, pressed against me like he was afraid I would disappear again. Karen exhaled sharply behind me, but I didn't turn around. "You don't get to keep him," I said, my voice steady, not shaking, not breaking. "You never did." She didn't argue. She didn't say anything at all, because she knew she had already lost. I didn't loosen my grip on Max even as I turned back to face Karen, his body still pressed against me, his frantic breathing matching my own as if he was afraid that the second he let go, I would disappear again. Karen stood there, arms crossed tightly, her mouth set in a thin line, but she wasn't stopping me. She wasn't trying to grab Max or argue anymore. She was just standing there, silent, watching, realizing that there was nothing left for her to say. She had lost before she even answered the door, before she even opened her mouth, because deep down, she had known this wasn't going to last. She had convinced herself that she was doing the right thing, that she was giving Max a better life, that she was making the right decision, but none of that had been true. She hadn't expected me to fight for him. She had assumed that I would be like my mother, that I would just accept it, that I would let her tell me what was best for my own dog, that I would let her decide what Max needed. But she wasn't the one who had spent every day with him, who had walked him in the rain, who had stayed up with him when he was sick, who had known all the little things that made him who he was. She didn't know the way he liked to nudge his food bowl when he wanted more, the way he always circled 3 times before lying down, the way he always found his way back to me no matter what. He wasn't her dog. He never had been. "You shouldn't have come here," Karen said, her voice finally breaking the silence, but there was no anger in it anymore. "I shouldn't have had to," I said, my grip tightening slightly on Max's fur. "But my mother didn't give me a choice." She exhaled sharply, her gaze flickering toward the hallway where her daughter had disappeared, her expression tightening slightly, and I knew what she was thinking. She had made a mistake. Not just with Max, but with the way she had handled this, with the way she had tried to justify keeping something that wasn't hers. Maybe she had truly believed that she was doing the right thing, or maybe she had just wanted to believe it because it made things easier. But either way, it didn't change the reality. I started moving toward the door, not waiting for her permission, not bothering to look back because I didn't need to. She wasn't going to stop me. She wasn't going to call the police, wasn't going to try to pull some last desperate attempt to make me leave without Max, because she knew it wouldn't work. She had already lost, and she was finally accepting it. But then, just as I reached the door, she spoke again. "You know she's going to punish you for this, right?" I froze for a fraction of a second, just enough for the words to settle in, for the reminder of what was waiting for me at home to creep back in. My mother. Her anger. The consequences. But I already knew that. I had known it from the moment I made the decision to come here. I had known it when I took the money, when I tracked down the address, when I stood at this door and refused to leave. "I don't care," I said, and this time I meant it. I stepped outside before she could say anything else, before she could try to change the outcome of something that had already been decided. The air felt colder now, sharper, the weight of everything finally sinking into my chest as I adjusted my hold on Max, making sure he was secure before I started walking. He stayed pressed against me, his body still trembling slightly, but he was calm now. He knew we were going home. I didn't have a ride. I hadn't planned that far ahead. But it didn't matter. I would walk if I had to. I would keep moving forward, one step at a time, because for the first time since this all started, I wasn't afraid of what was coming next. I had one. I had Max. And nothing else mattered.